License and registration. You hand the officer your documents. Then instinct kicks in. You lock both hands tight on the steering wheel, like every driving instructor taught you. 10 and 2. Don't move. Don't blink. And then suddenly the officer's tone changes. Why are you gripping the wheel like that? What are you hiding? Are you nervous? Now the stop feels different. The questions get sharper. Most people don't know their rights until it's too late. If you want to stay one step ahead and never get caught off guard, hit subscribe now. And if this opened your eyes, share it with someone and tell me your thoughts in the comments. The flashlight stays on you longer, and you're sitting there wondering, wait, did I do something wrong? Can acting too compliant actually make an officer suspicious? And what should you do during a traffic stop if you want to stay safe without accidentally making things worse? Because here's the reality most people never hear. During a police stop, officers are constantly reading behavior. Your hands, your voice, your eye contact, your movements, even silence. And sometimes the exact thing people think looks respectful can get interpreted completely differently by law enforcement. That's what this video is about. Not fear, not anti-police drama, just understanding how traffic stops actually work and how to protect yourself legally without escalating the situation. Because one bad movement, one unnecessary statement, or one moment of panic can completely change the direction of a stop. And the biggest mistake people make? They think the roadside is the place to prove a point. It's not. The goal is simple. Stay safe, do not escalate, do not consent unnecessarily, and do not talk yourself into problems. So let's break this down carefully. First, understand this. Officers are trained to look for indicators, not proof. Indicators. Nervous behavior, overly rehearsed behavior, sudden movements, refusing commands, excessive talking, even unnatural stillness. That means there is no perfect body language that guarantees a smooth encounter. One officer may see tight hands on the wheel as respectful. Another may see it as fear. Another may think you're overcompensating because you're hiding something. That's why your goal should never be act innocent. Your goal is to stay calm, predictable, and legally controlled. Here's the first mistake people make. They freeze up completely. Officer walks up. "Where are you headed tonight?" And the driver responds like this. Nowhere. I mean, home? I'm just tired. I wasn't speeding, was I?" Now the officer hears nervousness, rambling, and possible inconsistency. And nervous talking causes more problems than silence. You are not required, in most situations, to answer investigatory questions unrelated to identifying yourself or handling the traffic matter. That does not mean be rude. It means keep answers short, calm, controlled. For example, "Officer, I'd prefer not to answer questions." Simple, professional, non-aggressive. Why does that matter? Because every extra sentence creates more opportunities for misunderstanding, contradiction, or suspicion. And remember, people talk themselves into searches constantly. Officer says, "Do you mind if I take a quick look inside, right?" That sounds casual, friendly, almost harmless. But consent changes everything. If you voluntarily allow a search, you may lose the ability to challenge it later. So if you do not want to consent, the wording matters. Say this clearly. "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." Not angry, not sarcastic, not defensive, just clear. Why is that phrase important? Because it does two things at once. First, it avoids physical resistance. Second, it preserves your legal position by making your lack of consent unmistakable. A lot of people make the mistake of arguing instead. "What? You can't search my car. That's illegal." Now emotions rise, voices rise. The stop becomes confrontational, and roadside arguments almost never help you. If the officer proceeds anyway, do not physically interfere. You can verbally refuse consent without resisting. That distinction matters. Now let's go back to the steering wheel issue specifically. Should your hands be visible? Generally, yes. Visible hands usually help reduce officer anxiety during initial contact. But there's a difference between calm visibility and robotic behavior driven by fear. Some people grip the wheel so tightly they look terrified. Others stare straight ahead and refuse to move at all. That can sometimes create tension because the behavior feels unnatural. Instead, think calm and normal. Hands visible. Movements slow. No sudden reaching. If you need to reach for documents, say it first. For example, my registration is in the glove box. I'm going to reach for it slowly. Why does this help? Because officers are heavily trained around weapon awareness during vehicle stops. Sudden movements increase uncertainty. Clear communication lowers it. Now, here's another trap. People think being overly friendly will end the stop faster. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But nervous over-explaining can absolutely hurt you. Officer says, "Have you had anything to drink tonight?" And the driver says, "Just one beer like 4 hours ago with dinner, but I'm totally fine." That single sentence just created an entirely new investigation. Do not lie, but understand that volunteering extra information rarely helps you. And if the stop starts shifting toward detention or possible arrest, this becomes critical. At that point, one of the most important phrases is, "I exercise my right to remain silent." That phrase matters because silence alone can sometimes be misunderstood, but clearly invoking your right makes your intention legally unmistakable. Then stop talking. That's the hard part for most people. They invoke silence, then keep explaining. Do not do that. Another important phrase, "Am I free to go, or am I being detained?" This question matters because it forces clarity. Either the stop is continuing legally, or you may be free to leave. But tone matters here too. Not, "So am I being detained or what?" That sounds confrontational immediately. Instead, "Officer, am I free to go?" Calm, direct, professional. Now let's talk about another major mistake. Trying to win the legal argument on the roadside. People quote laws, threaten lawsuits, pull out phones yelling constitutional phrases, and instantly the encounter becomes emotionally charged. Know your rights, absolutely. Record if legally permitted in your jurisdiction, absolutely. But the roadside is not the courtroom. Even if an officer is wrong, escalating emotionally in the moment can make the situation worse physically and legally. Protect yourself intelligently, not emotionally. And remember this. Laws vary by state and by circumstances. Some states require identification in certain situations. Some do not. Search rules can depend on probable cause, warrants, plain view observations, or specific exceptions. So this video is educational, not personal legal advice for every situation. The safest general framework is consistency. Stay calm, keep movement slow, do not volunteer information unnecessarily. Do not consent to searches you do not want, do not physically resist, and clearly invoke rights when needed. One more phrase that becomes important if physical control starts happening, "I am not resisting, but I do not consent." Why does that wording matter? Because it separates physical compliance from legal agreement. You are not fighting physically, but you are also not voluntarily approving the officer's actions. That distinction can matter later. And finally, understand this. The goal of a traffic stop is not to beat the officer, not to win an argument, not to prove you know constitutional law better than police. Your goal is to get home safely while protecting your rights intelligently. That means calm voice, no sudden movements, no roadside debates, no unnecessary admissions, no consent given casually under pressure, and no panic. Because panic changes behavior. Behavior changes officer perception, and perception changes encounters. So remember the framework. Visible hands, slow movements, minimal talking, no consent to searches, ask if you are free to go, invoke silence if necessary, request a lawyer if questioning becomes serious, and never confuse compliance with surrendering your rights. Because the safest police encounter is usually the one where you stay controlled while letting the legal process, not roadside emotions, handle the dispute later. And in the next video, we're going to break down one of the biggest traps during traffic stops. Why officers ask, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" and why your answer can completely change the stop.